direct work. So this direct work session that Suzy did with Johnny and Tara was quite brief but pretty constructive. Suzy set some goals and was mostly able to achieve them. Her goals were realistic given the circumstances, and she paid attention to the children's full range of expression rather than just what they said. So let's look at it. To start with, we have the reason for contact box. This is brief but descriptive. It's more helpful than just writing home visit to do direct work. Now looking at the main case note, first we have the letter to the children. Again, this is explaining what happened and why. Suzy introduces some social work jargon, so the word tools, and explains what it means in this context. She also actively demonstrates that she kept the children in mind while creating these tools by talking about how she went for dinosaurs and unicorns instead of just being generic about them being tools. Now, Suzy could have explained what happened during the work. However, she also knows that by the time Johnny and Tara read this, they're almost certainly going to be adults. And so she's willing to let her work speak for itself in the case note below. The visit. Suzy gives some context for how the visit was arranged. She records that she made an active decision to speak to the children together, since they're both quite young and would likely be more comfortable in each other's presence, given that they don't know her very well. Some departments may consider this sufficient to consider the children to have been marked as being seen alone. Some wouldn't. My view is that together is fine, given everything we know right now. We have to balance up Tara being under 3 years old and Johnny not being very communicative and being more comfortable in each other's presence. Suzy records that this was a decision rather than just what happened, to show that there was actual thought put in it. People might disagree with her decision, but she's at least showing that that's what it was. Her description of Johnny contrasts with his silence on her first visit, which shows the reader that something's changed with how Johnny views Suzy. Her work with Tara explored Tara's understanding of the emotions on the sheet. She described Tara's reactions to each face and quoted her in her responses. Tara seemed to have been on a bit of a cake tear at the time of this work, and Suzy didn't push for other answers. She recorded what Tara said, and also recorded Tara's tone of voice and body language where she thought it was important. Tara describing her daddy being angry and naughty and answering questions about feeling scared would convey a lot of information in Tara's tone of voice that simply recording her words would not. This also shows future Tara reading the file that Suzy was trying to understand what Tara was experiencing and not just what she was saying in her words. Johnny. Suzy again describes her interaction with Johnny beyond the exercise. Partly this is to record her good practice and make it visible, as I've described before. Partly it's to record the improving relationship and him being willing to speak to her compared to last time. Partly it's to show future Johnny that she took his interests, and by extension him, seriously. Finally, it's to give Johnny his full voice. You'll see that Suzy has recorded Johnny's non-verbal communication, nodding, shrugging, shaking his head, smiling, etc. And Suzy also records a decision she made on the fly to not ask Johnny directly about something he said before she could speak to Lucy about it. Of course, in real life, you would probably at least ask a couple of follow-up questions, but for the purposes of this video, I wanted to highlight that she's making a decision and recording that decision and giving her reasoning. It might feel like I'm pushing this, but it's very, very important that where you do make these sorts of decisions while you're out working on a case, that you record that it was an active decision, wasn't an oversight. You might not agree with the decision that she made, but she was the one who was there, you weren't, and giving a little bit of her reasoning about it, she's showing that it was something that she as a professional decided to do. And professionals, especially experienced ones, are capable of making these types of decisions, but they also have a professional obligation to show reasoning and ownership in their recording. A sentence or two is usually sufficient. Lucy. Suzy records her discussion with Lucy about the video Johnny mentioned. She records Lucy's responses and describes the video that she saw. She cautions that her record of the video might not be word perfect, but is correct in what it conveys generally. Suzy also recorded her observation of Lucy's responses, again non-verbal communication. Suzy records that she reflected in action about her response. Again, recording this thinking shows Suzy's good practice and the reasons for making the decisions she did, not just the decisions by themselves. She discussed the safety plan that she came up with last week. She discussed that again and clarified the purpose of the plan with Lucy to try and ensure that Lucy understood it. Analysis. Suzy considers whether the aims she set out in her direct work plan were achieved. In this case, mostly they were. She considers not just what the children said, but how they said it and what that meant about the bigger picture. I.e., they didn't appear coached and seemed reasonably happy living at home overall. Suzy reflects on Lucy showing the children the message from Mike. She thinks about whether this was a genuine mistake or if there was something more. She doesn't consider Lucy to have acted deliberately against her and the children's safety, more that she maybe didn't fully understand or has some competing motivations. Again, not malicious, but given what she knows about Lucy's history, the way that she functions around her relationship with Mike. Suzy's completed the direct work plan by thinking about what she gained from this session and what she should look for next time. Even though the children didn't say anything that suggested they were overly worried at home, Suzy was still able to get some good information from observing their interactions and non-verbal communication. When we're talking about getting the voice of the child from direct work, this is what we mean. Their non-verbal cues enabled Suzy to determine whether their verbal things that they were saying were genuine, or if she was worried that maybe they'd been coached. By being very clear in her recording about this, allows others to follow her reasoning and judge for themselves whether her conclusion is correct.